Welcome back. Our final event for the forum is a roundtable discussion encompassing the senior leadership of all the Joint Special Operations University's subordinate organizations. The intent of this roundtable is to determine, from discussion with all of you, what topics in future fora and other JSOU venues would be of most value to the force and how we can best cover those topics. Along with our president, Dr. Ike Wilson, whom you've already met, the roundtable members include Dr. Amie Lonas, Dean of the College of Special Operations, Low Intensity Conflict, Competition, and Cooperation. Dr. Shannon Meade, Director of the Institute for Soft Strategic Studies. Mr. John Pouchet, Director of the Center for Adaptive and Innovative Statecraft, and Master Chief Petty Officer Dr. Brad Rhinelander, Deputy Commandant of the Enlisted Academy, whom you've already met. Dr. Wilson, the roundtable is yours.
General Howard, thanks so much. And just let me thank you for what has been, we call you the maestro for a reason. It's been a mastery job you've done for the last 2 days, bringing us to this point. I'll try my best not to screw it up towards the last 100 meters of the finish line, but thank you very much for the forum, and we look forward to the next one, which for our audience and our participants, that's just a teaser for how we'll end after the forum, teasing you towards the next forum upcoming. Thanks again, General Howard.
Thanks for this privilege and an honor. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. To everyone, to the participants, to the friends, family, colleagues, commanders, senior enlisted leaders, the leader operators at the X on their way back, and many of you on the way to the X. What we wanted to do with to close this forum, as the brochure shows, we're calling this Epilogue as Prologue. Again, these are running forums that we produce first and foremost for the primary client, which is the soft leader operator, those soft professionals. But all of us is part of one team, so we wanted to try something a little different this forum. And so for the next 41 minutes or so, and frankly, in joining you all through the chat function to send ideas of your own as well as questions. If we don't get to them during this session, we will get to them in the after action review process and make sure that all of you who want the answers to some of those questions, we'll send it out to you. But what I wanted to do with our leader team here is to basically join you into a conversation that we're going to have here, kind of Johnny Carson style. Talking about and kind of doing a forecast forward of what we think from a JSOU Next standpoint, the next year's worth of themes and topics for framing out our next year's worth of future of soft forums, what they should be. And again, we enjoin you to use the chat function to put your own ideas for what you would like to see us working on. Before I do that, I've got a couple of pictorials. I'm not going to kill you with a PowerPoint presentation, but I do want to give in my opening, and then I'm going to go around the horn and give each of my colleagues here 3 to 5 minutes just to kind of talk about what they do in leading the sub-organizations of your university, SOFT's university, the Joint Special Operations University. But I'll lead off with a couple of quick shots through slides to set a stage and give everyone, including ourselves here on the internal team, a reminder of what the point and purpose of these forums are as they fit into a larger context. So I'm gonna start and just kind of click through real quick some of these slide presentations. And if I can ask my team just to pull them up. Okay, there we go. Okay, again, I'm gonna go through these pretty quick. What I wanna do is, the soft forums, these are intended to be quarterly running estimates, ranging from an assessment of past interests and dynamics in the security environment, added to a future forecast from an anticipatory and perspective vantage point of how the world has turned, right? We started yesterday with a theory of next, as we called it, our own proposition, our own lens through which we look at and try to identify and come up with some causal factors and come up with our own hypotheses, if you will, our own propositions of how to explain the world as it's turning, world at strategic inflection point, et cetera, et cetera. What this slide shows you is JSOU Next. The world has turned. It is presenting a requirement for all nations, all states, all stakeholders, from the smallest all the way up to the great powers, to reconsider self in terms of our interest and our place in that ever-turning and ever-changing world. All of our formations, including our joint professional military education institutions, and pointedly for special operations forces, the Joint Special Operations University, we have to reconsider self. New profile, new preparedness, new presence, and new purpose for that change. This slide just gives you a snapshot of what our ultimate goal is, and the forums lie center place for getting us at that centerpiece of what you see on the slide depiction. Helping to shape, foster, and grow in a full life cycle progression from cradle all the way up through soft for life, that current and next generation soft leader operator, the soft professional. You can see our imperatives of leveraging theory, harvesting history, as you've witnessed and participated in through the forums yourselves, and then all that with a very particular polytechnic applied science and art purpose. Scholarship with practical impact for the operator on their way to the X, at the X, and on their way back from the X for the practice piece. Below the slide there, you see everything has to be more anticipatory in perspective, right? From a teaching and learning approach, from research analysis, and from service outreach and engagement. The forums bring all that together on a quarterly, every 3-month quarterly basis to create a venue for consultative conversations, to take the theory, harvested and embedded and embroiled with the history, and to make that practically relevant in as an anticipatory manner as possible. We've talked a lot about, and during the strategic culture panel in particular, from an American standpoint, from a US, maybe wider Western perspective, maybe our culture is pegged largely, at least as perceived by other, largely upon technology, right? We were forewarned over the last couple of days of not approaching technology as solutions in and of themselves, but as tools towards greater solutions. What you see depicted on the slide now are 8 areas that define the technological enablement piece of this next 4th generation evolution of the soft leader operator, what we call the hyper-enabled operator. We certainly must leverage technology, and none do it better, frankly, than the United States, historically speaking. So highly enabling the operator is essential. However, equally, if not overmatchingly essential, is to make sure that as we hyper-enable the operator, we ensure that we're also highly educating. While we hyper-enable, we're doing it in a responsible way to enable that leader operator, and that is what forms the hero concept, undergirding the forums and undergirding and giving us our destination point for JSOU Next. Again, I already spoke about, you need a theory of next. Theory helps to inform. It gives you a starting point, a launch pad. And in order to be anticipatory, you have to have some type of lens through which you look at the ever-changing world in which we have a public professional purpose to serve. I'm not going to go, we've gone into this already into detail, but you can see that theory of next is all about understanding the overarching dynamics of change, as well as, and importantly, fundamentally so, beginning and ending with the fundamental root causes and underlying currents of that. We have to approach this from a polycentric standpoint. And again, we had at least a couple of presentations over the last 2 days that talk specifically about what that polycentric approach to problem identification and problem solving is all about. All that adds up to asking and answering the questions from a joint professional military education activity standpoint. What should we own in terms of expertise in the experts themselves? And equally important, if not more importantly, therefore, what should we not pursue to attempt to pursue in and of ourselves to own as the JSOU more particularly? And that's where you all come into play. What we are not rightly poised and developed to develop and hold in-house as the JSOU in terms of expert knowledge and expertise, that's our motivation to do these things through and with partners, allies and partners, and that's you, and that's what this is all about. It begins and ends with those governing dynamics of what we call the 5 soft truths. This is just a snapshot, 2 maps, national and international. Again, the corporate university model hub and spoke, and moving towards a situational awareness, understanding, integration, and coherency by, with, and through a partnership of thinking, doing organizations, GMC. And this is just a picture that shows you what that looks like conceptually and where the university is, a true multiverse of the university system. Likewise, internationally, same as the organization that we serve, U.S. Special Operations Command, the 70,000 soft leader operators that compose it, just from the U.S. side. We have to be as international, trans-regional, and global as the command for nation, not self. And that's what gives, this slide gives you a conceptual picture of the relationships that we already currently have and the ones that we're building through a collective action with all of you through these forums. The forums fit into this overarching diagram, and again, and this will be one of the last slides I show before we get into the dialogue. It's all about using these forums on a quarterly basis to begin with research and analysis, so we can be anticipatory and perspective in all that we do, from teaching and learning through research itself to practical applications that are usable now and into the future. It begins with service outreach and engagement, again, these dialogues with yourselves. It goes through the cycle of different forms and apparatuses of different types of research and analysis, all that to distill into a constant refreshment and refitting of our curriculum for teaching and learning. This is what makes these forums different than our parents' and our grandparents' conferences, symposia, forums, and the like. We don't do these forums just for the plenary sessions. You are participating in a constant refreshment of the curriculum that cycles back into informing the next round of research. That's the big difference about what we're trying to do here with these running Future of Soft forums. 3 main themes that we've been covering, and they're all nest with the national security and strategy and the national defense strategy and SOCOM priorities. What is soft's utility in a supporting, mostly in a supporting role in the context of strategic competition, in the context of emerging soft and ever-changing soft identity, whether that ranges from diversity and inclusion issues, moral ethical questions and issues of current and future soft, use and utility, or the collision, what we call the collision between the 4th age of soft and the 4th technological revolution, and what comes out of that, good, bad, and indifferent for nation, not self. And with that, that's a framer for what the point and purpose of what you've been doing with us here, frankly, for the last 2 days is all about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first of our JSOU leaders, Associate Dean, or Associate Provost and Dean of College, Dr. Amie Lonas. Amie?
Good afternoon. Thanks. You didn't steal all my thunder. You left
usually,
me a little bit. You
I usually
do.
try to steal
That's
all
right.
your thunder. Thank you.
No, I would just say that, you know, when we began JSOU Next, our first initiative was really the curriculum refit study. And so we started by a comprehensive review of our current courses, which was traditionally what JSOU had delivered, very start and stop, accredited, very kind of rigid formatted types of courses. And so we looked at those and we basically bin those in 3 different areas: the teach to perform, or teach to enable, teach to inform, and teach to prepare. And so when we started looking at those courses and putting those into those bins, we realized that we had some gaps in what we needed to deliver. So looking at this from the college perspective and looking at the JSOU Next, the process, JSOU Next is going to be based off of the research that's generated here in the forums. So what you generate here, the team generates, then we will take that and feed that into the courses for future implementation. And I don't think that we will have a few traditional courses like we're doing now, but we're really moving through the refit study. We recognize the need to be more modular, to be able to fit a niche that's not out there. So we can tailor make these to the client based on their needs and what they're looking for. And by using the content that's coming out of the forums, then we can actually build those flexible type course delivery throughout the enterprise.
We think that this is essential from a soft unique and soft peculiar standpoint because of the unique operational tempo and the deploy to dwell parameters of the soft leader operator, right? We just don't have unique to to these formations the opportunity to bring everyone in for a full, as the conventional services are able to do, at least 3 or 4 formal times where you're spending 12 months at a time in residency for the full 12 months, pulling them out of formation. Soft simply does not do that, and frankly, one of the factors that allows the rest of our nation's security and defense formations to be able to do that is because of joint combined soft always being at the edge for deployed in action. No, that's great.
Good start.
Good start. Good start. We'll come back around and get and get some ideas flowing in terms of the ideas for the next forums.
Sure.
Shannon, how about talking to us a little bit about the Institute?
Yes, sir. JSOU has always done research since its inception, but we've done a poor job, one, of marketing that research, and two, pushing it to the TSOCs and the components for application, like you were saying. So that's where I think JSOU Next is taking us, is the application of that research and making sure that we market it properly. A great example is the project we're working on with SOCCENT right now. I won't go into details on it, but we've got JSOU, intelligentsia, if you want to say that, working directly with SOCCENT on some very applicable plans in the Middle East. So we want to do that with all the TSOCs in the future. No longer do we want to do the 80,000 word monograph. We want to do something that's a little more timely.
Right.
Frankly, it takes a year plus to get something out there when it's 80,000 words. So if it needs to go out quicker, we're going to push it out quicker. One of the other things we're looking at, we held an annual research topics workshop. We involve all the TSOCs and the components with it. It's a great exchange between JSOU and the soft enterprise. Maybe we need to do that more often, in a more timely fashion, and maybe some shorter, quicker looks. We don't want to get away from the in-depth research all the time, but we want to make sure that we expand it with some of the quicker looks as well.
I think that last point is a great one. And again, Dr. Meade directs the Institute for Soft Strategic Studies, but also within that, he's also the director of the JSOU Press. So we want to make all of you understand that not only is this your university, but you also have a press, specifically tailored towards soft, unique, and soft-specific matters of security and defense, conflict studies, cooperation studies, and the like. To Dr. Meade's point, ideas that you have in terms of the types of products, right, of how we can propagate the ideas that are generated through forums like this, incubated between forums and practice through the practitioners, and we count on your ideas in terms of what kind of packages and how we can deliver that's going to be more timely and frankly more appealing from a useful and an aesthetic perspective. I think those points are spot on.
And a sales pitch here, quick sales pitch.
Absolutely.
You go to the JSOU website, follow the link to the library. You can dive down into those monographs that are there. You can pull them down, and if you're out there in one of the TSOCs or components, you can always do a request, and we will push out hard copies. So we do a mixture. So you got the electronic version, plus we also have the hard copies. So take advantage of that, please.
Outstanding. Thanks, Dr. Meade.
Yes, sir.
John Pouchet, our great director of a brand new build in JSOU Next in your university, the Center for Adaptive and Innovative Statecraft. So John, how about some ideas on what your ideas are for the center, the kind of things that we're doing now and thinking about doing in the future?
Yes, sir. I think the radical change for the JSOU Next was the establishment of the Center for Adaptive and Innovative Statecraft. We're the ones that take the knowing to the doing. So taking the research, the topics that come out of these forums, and we look at those topics and everything else, and we try to find out what can be used, what can we do to adjust these through applied research rather than just straight research, and to be able to work those things in to be able to come up with some kind of integrated campaigning for the TSOCs and the components and everything else. So taking the knowledge that generates out of these, taking some research and having basic research done to find the literature review, get down there, do it, and then taking that from all the knowledge that's out there and being able to allow the organizations out there to actually develop some type of integrated planning, working with the JSOU to be able to do that. So what we have is we have like applied research initiatives. We take a topic and we go off and we determine what that topic is. We bring in different expertise from the military side, from academia, from everything else, we get what's going on there, and we break that down to find out what's going on there. And from there, we spin out into some kind of design inquiry into it to determine exactly what is the problem, what's going off, and try and come back in and develop it. And then once it transitions on into our integrated campaigning, once we determine who the user is, and then try and get with those individuals, those organizations to say, okay, you have a campaign plan that you need to develop within Africa, South Africa, whatever it is. Okay, so here's what we can do to help you do that. These are things that you can do, what's going on with that. And we're doing that with not only the TSOCs, but also in the interagency community with Border Patrol, State Department, and other stuff, working on other things that are associated with great power competition, but it goes transient across all the different theaters and off the different agencies.
John, that's a phenomenal rundown. I'm gonna go bold here, and I'll say I'm not sure I have a whole lot to substantiate it, but it's my gut feel from being on the planet a long time. But one of the things we're very excited about in terms of the work specifically being done and is going to be done experimentally and innovatively within the center, but across all of the JSOU, is this imperative of integration. Here's the bold piece. I would offer that there's great ideas and have been great ideas. There's certainly statutory requirements that drive us towards enhanced, improved jointness, right? And now, moving, slowly but progressively from the joint more towards the JSOU. But I would put on the table that going from concept to practical application on the ground, you see very little cases of real true to form in practice, joint integration, separate from without the needle and thread, knitting all the patchworks together, that is called SOF. Joint Combined Special Operations. I believe that my proposition on the table is that is going to hold even increasingly true furthermore as we move more into this realm of integrative and what some are calling competitive statecraft. And so hence the idea of creating a center where we can bring all those parts and pieces together for experimentation and innovation through multi-year collective cross-functional teaming, multi-month, multi-year projects that are client-based and client-sponsored to actually get after figuring out what the new needles and what the new thread is required to get to that next 3 or 4 stages beyond the jointness, frankly, that we were expected to arrive by our congressional leadership 34, 35 years ago. So I'm excited for you, John, in particular, and frankly, I'm a little envious. I'd much rather be the director of the center, frankly. This thing's not on, right? No. Than being the president. There's just a lot more fun in those formations. I'm going to turn now to Master Chief Petty Officer and Dr. Brad Rhinelander, who's just done a phenomenal job as our director, our deputy commandant of the Joint Special Operations Senior Enlisted Academy, or JSOU. Brad is going to be moving on, PCSing back out into the formation. Once a member of JSOU, always a member of JSOU, so we'll definitely keep a tether to you, Brad. But before I go further, I just want to thank you for your phenomenal service and the service that you're going to be doing, and aloha, which means certainly goodbye in about a month or so, but hello again.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I just want to turn it over to you, maybe talk to us a little bit about all the innovations that you've been leading, you and our Commandant Roger Watts.
It's certainly collaborative with the component C-cells, the USOCOM C-cell and the commanders, both at the TSOCs and the components. So, really there is a lot of integration that does happen at the Enlisted Academy, as you know, where we deliver intermediate through advanced, senior, and executive EJPME to our soft forces. Mm-hmm. And this is really through the identification of a gap through the service EJPME, where we have forces out operating in these very unstructured environments. Sometimes this is onesies and twosies, or just with E5s, E6s supporting an officer. In those kind of soft, unique environments, and really realizing we needed to arm our force with understanding of the policy space, the GEM-C arena, and all these kind of dynamics that are not necessarily covered down on by the services. So through that, there's a lot of integration, and very early on now our folks are getting introduced to not only their brothers and sisters from across the components, but across the capabilities, right? Yeah. Whether it's I/O or anything else, having those aha moments of how they can integrate those capabilities to provide a better product for the commander, better advise the commander and the warfighters downrange. I think there's a lot of running that goes on between the Enlisted Academy and the other departments. Whether it's our instructors or other folks sitting in on these forums, them participating in ours, yep. And identifying, hey, we need to add a little bit more of that to what we have going on, and that's a great collaborative relationship. I think one of the more encouraging things I've seen since I've been at the Enlisted Academy is really seeing that customer capture of this hungry younger generation that the biggest, I think one of the biggest feedback mechanisms we have of the value of what they're seeing in that education is once we see somebody go through SEP 1, the entry-level career education program, they're repeat offenders. They're on it. Right. And sometimes they want to go right back to the next one, and we want to space it out a little bit. So I think there's a lot to be harnessed and harvested from that student population as far as research that needs to be done within the enterprise. The student essays were a great resource for us that we had. Absolutely. Tangible, specific population that we could utilize. But then also I'd really like to see, and as I go back out to the force, I'll encourage this, is because I think we can show the value, because everybody's competing for these folks' attention, right? The lower you go, the more there's competition for their attention with everything they need to go. But there's also a lot that they know. There's a lot that they know that they don't know that can be harvested out of that. So, I think as we move forward with these forums, I'm going to be excited to see how we can better get some of those folks right from the contact layer integrated, having the conversations with the commander. And we've seen that even within the Enlisted Academy when General Clark or other senior leaders come in and is able to have that direct dialogue with the force. Both parties get as much out of it as the other.
Brad, I want to say a couple of things about the Enlisted Academy. Again, hats off to you and Commandant Roger Watts for just the innovative leadership that you guys have led that I've been able to see firsthand, but have been privy to prior to my arrival as the university president, but certainly since I've been here. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If we were able to take the program of applied learning that is the Enlisted Academy and bring it to higher scale and offer it to the entire officership, commissioned warrant officers as well as enlisted, we would certainly do so. But because of the unique, peculiar op-tempo and the deploy to dwell pressures on the force, particularly commissioned officer force, we just can't do that. But the ability to go modular, like Dean Lonas talked about, to go modular with the curriculum, with all the curriculum in to some degree, limited degree within the university, training POI as well, and to do that Lego piece of plug and play that Dr. Ellis and Mr. Charlie Black and Doc Alessa talked about during one of the earlier plenary sessions. The ability to do that will allow us to harvest the best out of what the Enlisted Academy, standard formatted program, to go modular and do that more tailored and nonlinear, non-sequential in terms of the learning, leader preparation development program of the rest of the university. And again, let me state this. When we say JSOU as the Joint Special Operations University, the university is not Tampa Hub, right? And I just want to make sure that all of us out there understand that. We are all the university, right? And critical to that is the hub and spoke model, is the college hub that is certainly here at campus in Tampa, but those service component schoolhouses, right? And from there, the GEM-C, as far and wide as you can divine and define the multiverse that is the University of JSOU. So I want to put that forward as well. Another thing I want to say is having someone like, not to embarrass him too much, but someone like Master Chief Petty Officer Dr. Brad Rhinelander, thinking doer, master thinking doer in both counts, master thinker and master doer, being able to cycle in to the university to teach to know, to teach to inform, to teach to prepare, and then to rotate back out to the field, right? to rotate back out to the field in leadership positions where Master Chief Petty Officer Rhinelander is going to be able to maintain the connection, participating in things like the forum, demonstrate by example the practical utility of education, the practical utility of theory, history to practice, right? The practical utilization of the high-minded academic-y thing, right? Especially when you can bring that to bear and overmatch your competitors, your adversaries, your frenemies and your enemies alike, right? That's what we're talking about here. The operational imperatives of education. That's what we're talking about here. The best way, we can talk about it all day, but the best way to do it is to example it. The last thing I will say is, having you out in the field also in the formations and folks like you, Dr. Rhinelander, you'll also be able to be an appetite suppressant on our end, right? So that we're not inundating. It's very easy for us, I put my academic hat on, it's like everything I'm doing here, all this highfalutin stuff, it's got to be practical to them, right? Let's just flood the zone. You'll be there, and folks like you are there to actually be the proper calibrated funnel, right? So we can actually get this tailor-made for practical utility. We've got about 15 minutes left, perfect amount of time to kind of shift gears. And I just want to open it up and just us have a kind of a round robin kind of free flow conversation and just start throwing some ideas out there, getting some ideas out there based on what the last year has been of forum runs. Right? It's hard to believe we've closed out. Last May we were doing the first GPC scoping forum, really driven by an imperative of a speed of the need being in this case back then the commanding general. I feel I need a course, some kind of course on great power competition, right? And something that we can actually package to push through our soft chairs and our soft liaison officers to the services so we can make sure that we are embedding not only in elective programs, but as much as we can into the core curriculum of the conventional services up and down PME, service PME, injects to make sure that soft unique, soft peculiar at this strategic inflection point, not a shift, not a pivot from the last 20 years of focus on counter VEO and counter terrorism and the like, but a rebalance that still finds us doing the full spectrum of use and utility of special operations and make sure at this threshold crossing we're getting that out. That's really what gave birth to the forum. So as long as we're getting those kind of demand imperatives, we will have these forums and these kind of situations running. But that was really the genesis story of what drove us, a commander imperative for nation, not self. With that, and knowing what we've done over the past year, just some ideas on what we should be considering as we frame out the next year's forums. Go ahead, John.
Sir, I think coming from the center, to move to the doing, I think one of the things we can start looking at, we've talked a lot about strategic competition. What we can look at in a future forum or a spinoff one is the strategic influence. Dig down deep into the strategic influence, social distances, all the stuff that's going on there within the influence type stuff, kind of understand it so we can take some of the knowledge that we've generated and we've generated through these other forums and now try and push that towards, how can we actually, we talk about, hey, we need to influence, so let's now talk about all the ways we can do it, how we can do it. Narratives, counter narratives, get beyond the narratives, all the other things that are out there we can need to look at through a strategic influence type.
Excellent. Amie, yeah.
I'll put my provost hat on for a minute.
For it, yeah.
But part of the curriculum refit, we developed learning pathways, and we have 5 of those identified. And so within the last 30 days, leads for each of those have been identified, and they're starting to build the content for those learning pathways. Part of the idea behind the pathway is that it's not just a JSOU course or content that is supporting that pathway, but we're going to be looking at partners out there that have expertise in those areas, faculty as well as content. So I think looking at those 5 pathways, we're going to need that focus over the next year in our forums. As an example, this fall, the September one is ideal. It's supporting our strategic intel and emerging technology pathway. Right. And that's actually a new department in the college. So I'm excited that content, along with that process, is going to develop an academic department within the college, but then feed a content portfolio that, to be honest, just hasn't really existed within the university. So I would think those were great opportunities coming up in the next year to really focus in on those learning pathways.
Just real quick, and I'm setting myself up for semi-failure here because every time I try to count out the 5 learning pathways that are derivative of a curriculum review that our Associate Provost and College Dean, Dr. Amie Lonas, has been running for the last 6, 7, 8 months
Right.
now. What's revealed out of that have been, and these are not replacing the classic 10 to 12 soft service soft core activities or tasks, but they are complementary to them. But what is bubbled out, 5 identified what we call joint soft common core competency knowledge arenas. And those are the foundation for what we're building these learning pathways. And here's where I'm gonna get myself in trouble, because I get to about number 4, and you guys are gonna have to help me out to get the 5th one. But the first, as Dr. Lonas mentioned, strategic and operational intelligence and emergent technology, right? And these are not gonna be a surprise to anyone, but it is revealing when you look for a joint common denominator, right? A common denominator may help us figure out what should be foundational courses and advanced courses. It doesn't exist it really doesn't exist out there in a formal doctrinal form. So that's what an experimental university like the JSOU does. We put propositions on the table, we pitch it to the assessors that matter for SOF, the CG and the commanders in the field. We did that about 3 weeks ago, and are getting really good positive returns. We do the field testing. So that's number 1. We're looking specifically at soft leadership and the soft professional ethic, asking the question, is there something soft, unique, maybe even peculiar to the professional ethic, right? And so we're building a pathway on that. Another area that we're looking at specifically on soft support to and of national resistance and resilience operations, right? Cornerstone to irregular warfare. I think I'm up to number 4. And this is where I start getting into trouble. Number 4 being informational advantage and strategic operational influence, to include the dynamics of information warfare, right? And then that last but not least, to Mr. John Pouchet's point, and a lot of activity taking place primarily in the center, but not solely so, the applications of in the combination of applied design, applied research, and how that informs integrated campaigning towards integrative, competitive statecraft solutions. And I think I got all 5 of them. Excellent.
Good job.
Excellent. Other ideas?
I would love to see a forum. I'll probably do a series of forums. We need to walk a mile in our allies or potential partners' shoes.
Oh, that's great.
And understand what their issues are. I mean, you look at Thailand next to China, okay. They've obviously got a whole different view of China than we do. And you can go on Germany and their reliance on Russian natural gas. We need to understand why they are willing sometimes to work with us, other times, wait a minute, we don't want to push that button.
Yeah.
So I think we could do a little more there.
Yeah,
understanding our allies. We keep looking at it from the U.S. perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, let's ask Australia what their real concerns are for the AOR.
I think that's really great. I'm reminded, I think it was April timeframe, our partners right down the street, US Southcom, hosted a 1-day Allies and Partners conference, and they took on this question of let's look at the world, let's look at it from the viewpoint of the Western Hemisphere, but let's look at it through the eyes of the Allies and Partners. You know, flip the script. You know. I think in that vein, I know they're planning on doing another in a year, and it's going to be a yearly thing. I believe they came at this last one from the east towards the Western Hemisphere, and now from a transatlantic perspective. This next intent, I believe, is going to go from the Western Hemisphere westward for a trans-Pacific perspective. I think that's a perfect opportunity for us to plug and play and partner with that. So that's definitely high on the list, I think. Propositionally. So other ideas and thoughts on the table?
Go ahead.
Brad,
I was just going to say to Dr. Meade's point, one of the most interesting participants I saw in a forum or applied research series in the past year was our South African cattle rancher that was in the applied research series in the fall, right? So your point, those perspectives that we're able to bring in, working with the command to continue to address classification issues, things of that nature. And I think that would bring me to the other point of, how do we, again, back to, how do we get our folks that are in the contact layer more involved in these things, whether bringing that practice in and providing vignettes of things that are actually occurring downrange. You've heard me complain before of there's not a day that goes by in SOCOM that I don't hear somebody saying we should do X, Y, or Z, and I'm like, yeah, somebody's doing that right now.
Right.
You want me to put you in touch with them?
Right.
So how we bring those folks in and provide additional value to the organization in that way.
I think that's such a great point, and it's another fundamental imperative that gave birth to the idea of the utility of the forum and why to do it on a quarterly basis. I mean, it takes a lot to turn a session like this on a 3-month turn. So we have 2. At any given time, we're almost like we're applying the Navy model, right? We've got 2. If we have a little bit more span and scope of control, maybe through partnerships, we'll get a three fleet approach. One always in theater on action, a cross-functional team. We always have one in transit on their way through the planning to preparation for execution, and then eventually we'll expand to a third where they're going to be in refit, actually doing what we're doing here and coming up in anticipatory ways with the next way forward. The other point I think is really imperative, and we'll start to close out here. I think we've got a little under 5 minutes. Maybe we start to kind of close out. I'm very interested, and it's always a grail quest. We're trying to figure out internal to panels, in between panels, how to get that right balance mix. So you don't come off being, and I'll say this as an academic, too academic-y and too in the ethereal, where it never comes back to terra firma, but at the same time, living up to our responsibility, frankly, to help the practitioner come up, right? And to do the work that, frankly, they don't have time to do. If they're doing this kind of work at the TSOC level, they're probably not doing their daily duty. Right? So how do we get that Goldilocks just right balance within plenary sessions? I think we've gotten better every time as we've gone forward, but of course I'm biased. We're looking for you all to send us that in your survey responses. But any last ideas on how well we've done? Let's just be honest with ourselves. Where we've missed. I mean, Duke yesterday had some really valuable, pointed, critical comments on how much what we might be doing, how much of it is rubber meeting the road and how much ain't. That's the kind of feedback we need. And then I guess the last piece before I allow you guys to actually answer this, fundamental to the forums is allowing all voices to get out, right? To get that flywheel momentum and get an amplification effect. Critically, the operators in the field. Our opportunity to have Brigadier General Josh Rudd, commander of SOC PAC, to keynote us on this. That's an opportunity for you to see that commander, hear from that commander, hear ground truth from the ground. So let me just open it up and get your all's thoughts on this.
One of the things I'd like to see, and Shannon's going to shoot me when I say this, but when you go to a traditional conference, there's usually breakout rooms.
Yes.
And so you can have some focused topics and discussions, very frank discussions. And I think that maybe it's what we're missing to get at the practitioner realm that you're talking about. If we have those breakout rooms and the practitioners are able to go in there with the academics,
yes,
and be able to have that kind of frank discussion and challenge that research or challenge that application, I think that's where we can really get a lot of goodness in expanding the focus. So
I think that's a great idea.
Thanks.
more work.
Shannon, you've been tasked.
More work.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good idea, and I'll give it to her. So, no, she's right. We have to be cognizant that we have to make sure when we're putting these panels together that we include the military. And
yes.
I mean, that's our prime customer. What Admiral Sand said, if we had but $1 left, we'd be educating a U.S.
right.
SOF operator.
That's
so
right.
we have to make sure that we include them. But I love the idea of the breakout rooms, and that'll actually bring some of maybe that E6 or that O3 will throw out that question.
Right.
I really don't agree with what you're saying. I was just recently in India, and this is what I saw.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's such an important point because that's imperative for those, the academics that we bring in, the folks from the think tank community and from industry that come in, to be able to hear that. I mean, that's a field testing of ideas, the same way that we field test material. Right, and to be able to this is one place where academia can come in and get their ideas field tested and get the ground, honest, candid truth from that leader operator at or recently on their way back from the X.
Right.
That ground truth. Yeah, I think that's such an important point. We got to continue to strive to do that. Go ahead.
And I
Brett.
think that General Rudd's comment at the end there, of how we better harness the creativity, right? Spot on of like, hey, we're getting creative people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes too creative. I say that jokingly, obviously, but how do we better harness that? And we can improve some of the formal mechanisms of doing that, but there's always going to be an informal element to that,
right?
And these forums provide a great focal point for that. So how do we lower the entry costs for those operators to come in? It's not, hey, I want you to come to speak, and then that individual turns around and he has a stack of administrative requirements for them to be able to come speak. How does the staff facilitate that? How does the enterprise facilitate that? And lower their cost to entry. They'll see the value by hearing heard, and then we'll have that being heard. Then have that informal network propagated throughout the enterprise.
That's outstanding. All right, I've made General Howard proud, I think. I'm down to 14 seconds. So I'm going to transition, but before I do, in the 10 seconds I got left, I just want to take an opportunity to just thank my leader team here. This is a team effort. You are all part of that team, but we've been running pretty hard over the last 8-9 months with JSOU Next. We've got a lot of running to do, and I just want to thank you for all the great work. Duty exceptionally well done. This doesn't happen on its own. And I'm just happy to be part of the team with you, and looking forward to the innovations going forward. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And I'm going to switch over now and go into junior maestro mode, filling in or trying to fill in at least part of the seat of Brigadier General Russ Howard, our great host over the last 2 days. And let me just start to bring us to a close here. This brings the roundtable discussions for the last 2 days to a close. Again, I want to thank my teammates for sharing their ideas on where JSOU should go with future events. As we bring this quarterly forum to a close, I'd like to take the opportunity to announce our next quarterly forum topic, which is our last forum of this fiscal year. When I say our, right? Our next event will be this fall, and will focus on strategic intelligence and emerging technology with an emphasis on the with an emphasis on the rebalance between counterterrorism and counterinsurgency and strategic competition, and not or. We're gearing towards a mid-September dates to follow, and it looks like we're going to be doing some type of synchronous, maybe if not even partnered, more formally partnered tie-in with Arizona State University's Center for the Future of War and the DC think tank New America in their annual Future Security Forum. So more to follow on that. Additionally, we'll look at interagency partnerships during this forum and future technological shifts and what that may mean for SOF current and future forward. Like this event, JSOU will host a 2-day event with subject matter expert panelists and speakers from around the world, and that'll be again in September. So please stay connected to us by following JSOU's pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, and now Instagram. And you have the icons pop up next to you or on your screens. They should be popping up for you now. And subscribe to our YouTube channel or by searching #ThinkJSOU. I think that'll be popping up for you as well at this point. We have an exciting lineup of events and programs that serve the SOF community. We hope you stay in touch with us on social media and continue to think JSOU. So this also brings the forum itself to a close. We covered many interesting topics over the course of these 2 days, from the great power competition in Indo-PACOM to well beyond, to include Central Asia, Africa, Central America, and South Asia, and thematically covering issues from security cooperation and national strategies to strategic culture. I'd particularly like to thank Brigadier General Rudd, who provided our keynote address, and Brigadier General Shoemaker, who spoke on the view from the J3 at US Indo-PACOM, as well as special thanks to Ambassador Harry Thomas. I'd also again like to thank our maestro, our host for the last 2 days again, Brigadier General Retired Russ Howard. And of course, I'd like to give a great thank you to our host again for the 2-day event, General Howard, but most of all, thanks to you, our audience. Again, let me just say that again. Most of all, thanks to you, our audience. I know it's hard to carve out time, even with the Zoom, even the virtual, for this kind of deep and broad dive for a 2-day event. And we really appreciate your time, and we hope we've measured up to making it a value investment on your part. And again, hope to see you in September. Your participation has been crucial to another successful JSOU forum. Again, your feedback is critical to us. Please share your thoughts and recommendations for overall forum as you have for each panel. We encourage you to access the links and provide your inputs today while the event and its content is still fresh in your memory. And finally, on behalf of the faculty and staff members of JSOU, so long for now. We look forward to you joining us again at the next JSOU forum or in one of the many other JSOU educational venues. And again, thank JSOU. Thanks again. Cheers.